I'm live. Go ahead. Hey, folks. My name is Dean Haspiel, and I'm here to talk about comics being made in 1985 when I was 17 going on 18. Yeah, we're about to have a bunch of real hot dogs of the industry discuss comics with us. Actually, I wrote up something, so I'm just going to read this real quickly, and then we'll have a nice, lively conversation. In 1985, I was a senior at LaGuardia High School, 17 going on 18. My good buddy Larry O'Neill was assisting Howard Chaykin and alerted me that Bill Sienkiewicz, who was working down the hall, wanted an assistant too, which is how I eventually wound up helping out Bill, Howard, and Walter Simonson on their comics in 1985. Dennis Cowan was there too. I learned how to use a ruler, an artograph, craft tint, employ inset panels, and exploit the narrative real estate of the blank page. And I witnessed Bill use an old tea bag like it was paint. I got turned on to Jim Thompson, Katsuhiro Otomo, and Warren Zevon. 1985 was the year I lost my virginity, literally, and became a cartoonist professionally. So with that little introduction, I want to bring on these other guys. And I don't know. I can't see them. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, wait, there's Howard. I don't know if you heard me. There's Bill, Dennis, nodding his head.
Oh.
And I know Walter's having an issue logging on, but
Fuck Walter. He's old.
Oh, okay, already. Okay.
Already. I'm still getting off on the professionally and virginity stuff. That was in
1985. Well, I know you love to talk about that, Howard. For some reason,
I love the virginity dance. I can't help it. It's the best.
We might have to save that for later.
I may. I'm not wearing any pants, so I'm not sure I want to do it today.
Guys, so great to see you guys, man. This is kind of amazing. And we'll have to, I guess, when Walter gets in. Yeah, well, what I want you guys to do is to help bring us back in time, okay? And set a tone for what the comics industry was like in 1985, 35 years ago. The last time all five of us, once Walter hops back on, shared the same space. You were all navigating mainstream and independent comics while breaking new ground. And what I want to do is I want to discuss what you were doing back then and get a piece of your mind, you know, where you were coming from and what you were, where you've been going ever since. So with that in mind, anyone who cares and knows about comics knows your legacy, knows that you guys are, you know, masters and innovators of the form, the comics form. And I want you to briefly introduce yourselves and tell us what you were working on in 1985 and why. And if you don't remember, I think I can tell you. So we'll start with Dennis.
Oh no! Why are you start with me? What was I in 1985? I was doing most of my stuff for, I think, DC Comics at the time, and I think that was the time when I was working on titles that started with V. So I was either doing Vigilante,
right,
V, or literally V, and I got two issues of each. And the last issue of each killed both books. So that was final. Yes,
that's right.
I'm just a book killer. Yeah.
Well, you were brought on. I think you were brought on to the end of the series for V, if I'm correct.
Right, I was, because they were going to kill the book. So
they were killing the book, and then and then you did a couple issues of Vigilante. And actually, I don't know if you know, but recently, is it James Gunn, who's taking over Suicide Squad? Is doing Peacemaker, that's loosely based on, I think, an iteration that you drew.
What?
Yeah.
Get out of here. You draw
Absolutely.
I have a vague memory of Vigilante.
So you drew one issue of a 3-issue arc that featured Peacemaker.
Oh my God.
Where he was kind of going bananas and going a little nuts.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the iteration. So maybe you'll be getting a paycheck. I don't know.
I just remember thinking when I was drawing it, I remember thinking, I'm not drawing the Punisher, I'm drawing the Vigilante. Like, this is
right.
So messed up. I should be drawing the Punisher. Why am I drawing the Vigilante? Like, it just felt like it was like the redheaded stepchild of like that kind of character.
Yep.
Like,
But and also, if I'm correct, I remember you loosely basing Vigilante on Clint Eastwood, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that was cool.
My limited drawing knowledge and whatever. I was a big Clint Eastwood fan back then. So
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
you know, why not just make him Clint Eastwood? I mean, he's the vigilante,
Yep.
aka the Punisher. So
Dirty Harry, right? I mean, it was,
At least
absolutely.
he had a nice ski sweater.
Say what?
He had a really nice ski sweater.
So Howard, when I entered the studio, you'd already been working on Flag for a year or so, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So that was your main gig. So in 1985, that's what you're working on. But like, how did you arrive to that? Like, I don't remember your earlier work. I think I was introduced to you through Flag, but obviously you'd done a bunch of comics before that for I think DC.
First comics made me a financial offer that made it possible for me to get out from under the debt that I'd accrued working for Byron Price. And because Price had put me in a financial hole that just fucked me forever. Friends don't let friends work for Byron Price. That was the gold we had. And first made me this offer. And I have no idea why they had confidence in me that it was worth their while. They also went to other talent for whom I have no respect, so that I'm sort of lumped in with that crowd. But you know, they did it, and I had spent a couple of years away from comics after a spirited disagreement with the editor-in-chief at Marvel, and
right.
who we're best friends now. Ah, fucking and I did the book, and it seemed, and it achieved. It was a success to stem, but not really of any real commercial consequence. It never really achieved a commercial land base.
Well, you were being paid a paycheck regardless of sales, right?
Yes,
is that the idea?
I did okay, and I also owned the material. So
and you own the material. That's right.
The material reverted back to me because of a clause in the contract, and that was a blessing. It really was. It hasn't paid off in any real way. But it demonstrated that I had value. That's really the real function of the Flag book, was to put me on the map as a guy who would finally develop the cattle to go with the hat.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I was an awful person and a big mouth, but I finally managed to create a body of work that justified my obnoxiousness, and that really was a life-saving experience. It really was.
Right. And that was your first foray into creator-owned comics, basically, right? I mean, you've done Cody Starbuck.
No, I mean, we, you know, all of us had done material we'd owned for various places. I mean, Friedrich's book, and you know, and some stuff for heavy metal, you know,
right?
All of us, and you know, Epic was there. There was all sorts of things. I mean, there were a lot. I mean, the '80s was a real buzzy time, and it really was. I mean, Dennis and Bill come along. I mean, these guys came from the blind side. I mean, I told this to Sienkiewicz. He's heard me say this, but I think Dennis as well. That what really happened was Dennis and Bill and Frank, to a certain extent, although John was our age, he was sort of in that crew as well, came along and bent superhero comics to their will, which none of my generation believed was possible. And that's really the key to what ultimately happened in the mid '80s. A new way of thinking about that sort of mainstream character comes along, you know.
And also editors, I think, trusted the talent.
And that's all Bill and Dennis and Frank.
Right.
Because John is like it's like a great traditionalist coming in. Sienkiewicz comes in, he's doing all this incredibly fucked up shit.
Yep.
And reinventing the way a page looks.
Yep.
Frank is synergizing Ditko, Eisner, and Kane.
Right.
And it's just no one, and it coincided with the fact of Stan losing interest in running the game and just basically being the presence as opposed to the creative presence. You look at what Electro Assassin, you look at Moon Knight. You look at what Dennis was doing, even on stuff like V, and then you look at and then Milestone comes along.
Right.
These guys bent the material to their will in a way that none of my generation could have considered doing.
Well, I mean, if we could talk to Bill for a second. I remember entering the studio, and at the time, my buddy Larry O'Neill, Denny O'Neill's son, was working for you, Howard, as an assistant. And then he told me that Bill down the hall was starting to look for an assistant. And I was like, I raised my hand and came running. And I was such a fan of, I remember reading Moon Knight. And then there was that issue, Hit It. And I think I've talked to Bill about this before. Like where he literally pivots, like there is a huge something just happened, something changed, you know. And I'd love to talk to Bill about that, but also get him into 1985. And it occurred to me, I didn't realize that Love and War, your Kingpin comic, was done in 1983 or 82, or came out in 83. Bill, I don't know if you can hear me.
He's moving slightly.
83.
Yeah, that came out before you did Electro Assassin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
What's that?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
But you're a little choppy.
Okay. All right. It's a little choppy on my end. I don't know if it's the way you guys do it. I don't know if it's me or if it's just systemic. But anyway.
Well, we're okay.
Shoot.
Bill's always breaking something. Breaking comics,
That's
breaking
hilarious.
Zoom.
Okay.
He's such a handsome fellow, though, so it's kind of tough not to.
Can't help himself.
I
I
know.
love the fact that it's the young guys who are fucking up technologically. Yeah, baby.
That's right.
That's fun.
But Bill,
By the way, I mean relatively young. Let's face it.
yes, of course,
Yeah, right?
of course. But Bill, if you can hear us and you're less choppy, like you had already completed the Kingpin Love and War story where you literally cut out wallpaper and put it on the Kingpin's the drawing of the Kingpin. Like kind of insane. You just pulling from other sources constantly to play with the form. You know. All right, you moving around? You getting a better signal?
Now he's sideways.
See, you're feeding right at the Haspiel stuff.
It is like a Bill Sienkiewicz comic.
Yep.
Now it's a wall, but it means something.
That's right. It does. Absolutely.
You couldn't draw a wall like that. So
No,
shut up.
I am so slap happy. This is the most entertainment I've had all day.
This is fucked up.
I think he's gonna try to hop back in or something. All right. And where's Walter? Damn it.
Did he ever show up?
No, he's not. He's trying to get in.
Centrist is saying he's talking to Walter.
Oh, he is. Okay. Well, all right. So
Yes, Bill.
Let me. I'm trying to.
oh man.
Tell Bill to try his iPhone instead of his Mac or iPad if he's on his iPad.
Drop. Can you hear me?
Try your phone.
Can you hear me?
Try your phone instead of your iPad.
What
Bill.
Dennis said.
Try your phone instead of your iPad.
I'm using my phone.
Uh-oh. We're in trouble now. Try your iPad instead of your phone.
Yeah, it's guys.
I'm
It's
using my phone.
when it's Safari, it doesn't work well with StreamYard. I'm Joe in the pro shop. I'm sorry that I got to tell you that. Sorry.
Maybe
I
you can
am
use
using-
Chrome.
That's why I always use my desktop because I'm on Firefox on my desktop and Safari on my iPad.
Yeah. I'm just
Well,
using
Safari is fucked.
Edge. That's better.
All right.
All right,
Hey, listen,
well-
I'm gonna try logging in on my.
Do it on your computer.
All right. I'm gonna try that. Let me. I'll be
Of
right
course,
back.
now you're perfect.
Can
Yeah,
you-
now he's
Now you're doing fine. Now you're doing fine.
I'm gonna try logging in.
okay.
All right. While you're doing that, while we have these two guys
Yeah,
here.
now you.
that
Yeah,
can
but
talk.
now you're looking at my nose. I'm holding the damn phone because this set here is just a complete.
It's just a
clusterfuck.
guilt pain effect.
But
that's all.
I
Are
don't
you
know,
combing your beard with a
things
fork?
have always worked out fine.
With my back scratcher.
I'm trying to touch Bill on his nose.
I've got a back scratcher here, so I'm using it.
I love it. So wait, Dennis, what did you hop onto?
good.
Because I know later on you worked on like The Question, and then Milestone happened. But what was your transitional period after doing those? Like, you weren't on a regular book, you know?
I wasn't on a regular book. I was just being given just stuff to do. I'm trying to remember what happened. I must have gotten The Question after that, right?
And when did Bill start inking you?
I did all those before then, and being vigilante, that was like part of the DC, stuff. I think I may have done like the Batman's 50th anniversary comic.
Okay.
That 3-parter thing with Sam Hamm. I may have done that next.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was like 85, 86. And then I think I did The Question after that.
Well, I mean,
around the same time.
So your studio, to let the folks know they're listening to this, Howard was in Upstart Studios with Walter, and previously, I believe, and Howard, it was Frank Miller, Jim Starlin.
The original group was me, Starlin, Simonson, and Myrick. Myrick decided to leave and didn't tell anybody, but said Jim Sherman could come in. The narcissism of white people. I didn't say that out loud, did I? And thank you very much. And then Starlin left and moved upstate, and Frank moved in. And that was the longest run. There were the four of us. Sherman was there, with mostly hanging out with Weiss. Simonson would show up. I was there at 7 a.m.
Yep.
And, oh my God.
He was.
Well, I had to start smoking my day early because I had a big ashtray to fill.
Oh boy.
And, so it was great. I loved that time in my life. I truly did.
And then down the hall was a different company that had like a back room where Dennis, Bill, and Michael Davis, I remember, were in the back room there. And do you guys ever name your studio, Dennis?
Yeah, we did. It wasn't. I'm sorry. It wasn't. Come in. Want to see Howard? Look.
Who's that? Who's that, Mom?
Howard. It's my wife.
I know, but I can't come on camera. I'm in a onesie.
She's in a onesie. Look, that's Dean Haspiel, who I knew when he was 17. This is the 1985 family.
Oh my
This
God.
is what we were doing in 1985. There goes Bill.
Who's frozen?
Bill's frozen, but he's smiling.
Hi, Bill.
And there goes handsome Howard Taken.
Hi, Howard.
Howard's only getting better looking, huh? As he gets older.
What's up?
No.
No, just one.
Hey.
Hey, Bill?
He says,
Hi, Bill.
Hello.
But did you name the studio, Dennis?
Yeah, we did. Well, actually, our studio was not down the hall. I think it was right next door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was right next door.
It was a print
It
shop.
was a print shop that owned this space that was right next door. Very nice guy who rented to us crazy people. It was me, Bill, and Michael. Bill was always the most serious among us. He was more like Howard, and like he would get there early and get to work, and actually work. I would kind of half-ass work. I don't know what Michael was doing, but
I remember what Michael was doing. He was working on an alien comic or a space comic, and I think it was like 8 pages for Epic, and I don't think he ever finished it. I don't know what it was.
I don't know if he ever did. I know that like my main goal for being at that studio was to go next door to Upstarts and bother Howard and Walter and Jim Sherman while he was there, and Frank when he was there. I was kind of around when all that stuff was going on, But when we were there was when Howard, Walter, Jim Sherman, and Frank were there.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Unless Bill can answer the 1980, what he was working on in 1985. Are you able to talk, Bill?
Bill, can you talk yet?
Can you guys hear me at all?
Intermittently.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can. I am. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Yeah. We can hear you. We can hear you.
I think I was working on. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm trying to log into the site on my laptop here.
Did you get an email connection thing?
I thought I was working on a New Mutant, finishing up the run.
You were on New Mutants and then started working on
I think I
Electra
was
Assassin
finishing
because
up-
that's what I
He was
helped you
working
on.
Yeah, he was finishing New Mutants and on to Electra Assassin. You're right.
And-
Right, you know, exactly. I finished up.
And if you want me to help, one of my questions I have is because you were next to each other, you clearly were sharing ideas and influencing each other. At some point, Dennis, you had Bill inking you on a lot of projects, right? Howard, I think you turned Bill onto craft tint because you started using that in New Mutants. And I remember taking pages home and craft tinting some of the New Mutants pages.
Is that true? I didn't know
Oh,
that.
I think so. I mean, Bill,
I thought. I mean, I got introduced to it by Roy Crane stuff,
right.
and Noel Sickles, and of course Woody.
Right.
But I didn't know if Bill picked up on that from me. You know.
Well, when I got there, you were using it obviously on Flag craft tint, which to explain to the viewers, that was like the gray tone that you could get on your artwork. It was a certain kind of paper that could develop with a liquid, and you would get two different versions of it, like one that was
do a tint or do a shade.
right. And then when Bill started working on after the Bear story, and it was doing the Legion story, you decided to kind of depart and do something a little bit different because you're going to get a little more psychedelic, I believe, and kind of this fractured mind. And he started using craft tint on a lot of that artwork that I helped apply. And then at some point, Bill wasn't coming in as much because I think he lived in Connecticut or something.
Right.
And I was coming and hanging out with like Dennis and Michael, and then doing the same thing, hanging out down the hall with Howard and Walter and Jim Sherman.
Right.
And I think Howard took pity on me and decided to get a second assistant. Oh, there's
There he
Bill.
Is it?
Whoa!
Is
Bill.
It's Bill Sienkiewicz.
There he is.
Can you hear?
Bill.
Bill, say a couple of words. Let's
Am
hear
I
you.
coming in at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why does he have a green thing in front of him?
Please tell me this is. Hold on a second. Let me.
He's always got something. Look at that green thing.
Why is there a
Try
green thing
this.
on you? Is there a green thing? What
So,
is it?
can you hear me?
it's judging
Is
him.
it live or is it
Remember
not?
Winky Dink?
I think he almost left the Matrix.
Wink.
I think there's a crack in the Matrix right there on Bill's screen.
Oh,
Amazing.
So much more fun than
Oh,
I had
man.
any idea would be. I love seeing you guys so much.
I love to see. We got to get
Yes,
Walter
please.
in, man. Where's Walter?
Let's
Oh,
talk about him while he's not
No.
here. What the fuck?
well,
Yeah, right.
So what was it like working in that same environment? And also, Bill, we were just catching up with everybody's work in 1985. You were working on New Mutants. You started Electra Assassin. You'd already done Love and War, and you were literally trying everything. As I mentioned in my introduction, I don't know if you heard it. I watched you take a used tea bag and like start to ink a panel with it or do something.
Oh yeah, it was, makes great beige tones and flesh tones. It actually
was-
really does.
It was incredible to watch.
Flesh tone.
Yeah, because just watching you just experiment and just reach and pull something from the side and just do something on your page was incredible. Even recently, when we hung out in Baltimore a few years ago at the museum, the art museum, I believe, with the Locust Moon guys, just watching
right.
you just play with ink and just it was like your art to me is intimidating to look at and figure out how you do it, but to watch you play it makes me want to play. You know, it's less intimidating. It's kind of a
Oh really? Well, that's great. That's actually
interesting
really great to hear,
paradox.
'cause- yeah, I mean, the only thing that I can do to explain that is that I make mistakes every, nanosecond, and then I'm trying to fix it. So it's fucking up, fix it, fuck it up, and so it's like a snowball. It's just whatever leaves the mark and seems to draw whatever I'm trying to translate. If it looks right, then I leave it alone. And then, until I don't, and then it shits the bed, But
so in a weird way, there's a chaos factor to your art, whereas I feel like with Howard, there was such structure and such a skeleton and bones to his, Did you guys, how'd you influence each other in 1985? You walking into each other's rooms, and can you talk about that?
Well, Howard's work, I'd known Howard's work since I think he was doing Pfafford and Mauser. I think I pretty much went through a whole period where I was.
Oh,
Walter.
Shut up. Jesus.
Yes, the Prince of Sunshine is with us.
I'm pretty cranky right now, pal. Don't fuck with me.
Well, we were talking shit about you. There must have been
He's got
I can
that.
leave again if you want to go back to it.
No, stay.
Cranky. That's that. I've been effing with technology, kind of cranky.
That was exactly right.
Yep. I know that look.
We won't go into it.
Well, I'm threatening the hamster on the wheel right now.
Just to catch you up, Walter, we've been basically talking shit about Sienkiewicz because he couldn't get on worth a shit. Now he's on, and now you're here. So
right.
The band is
we
back
planned this, Walter. We planned it this way, didn't we?
That's right. We're getting the band back together. I'm sure I said already.
Yeah.
This has not occurred since in 35 years. This is the first time that we are in a shared space like this.
That's about
it's
right.
Pretty
it's
insane.
Yeah. Anyway,
so Walter, just to catch you up, we were talking about 1985 and all the work that everyone was doing in 85, and Bill was just catching us up.
Like I said, in terms of the influence, I'd mentioned being familiar with certainly with Walter's work, but with Howard at DC, the work he was doing on Pfafford and the Gray Mauser, I just remember never having seen anything like it. And then when there was a certain design.
Oh, come on.
Oops.
I was going to ask him.
Technology wins again.
I'm sure Bill will be back.
But he'll be back not knowing we haven't heard him. We'll just continue speaking.
That's right.
You're back.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm putting a gun to my own head.
And we only have 25 minutes left before they kick us off.
Uh-oh.
So
Well, I'll fix it right after that.
okay, that's right.
You know how it goes. It's like finding
That's
the
right.
reference you need after you're done turning in the panel.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Here's my best story about that. I did Metal Men. I had to draw Stonehenge. This was like, 75? No internet, no web. I didn't have a lot of books back then. Trying to find Stonehenge pictures. I had a dictionary, had a picture of Stonehenge. It was like that big. But it was big, less than an inch high. But it was clear. I was worked out fine. 2 weeks later, I'm in the Strand bookstore. I find a whole shelf of Time Life books of the Neolithic age, early man, Neolithic, Paleo, all that stuff. And one of them is about Britain, Stone Age in Britain. And I open it up, and in some of these things, I have a chapter, and then a short chapter, and then a photo essay, a short chapter, a photo essay. The last photo essay in the book is Stonehenge. Stonehenge in the rain. Stonehenge in the dawn. Stonehenge in fog. Stonehenge from below. Stonehenge above. Stonehenge in every. And I said, all right. So I bought the book. I've never had to draw Stonehenge again.
Oh,
My God, if I do, I am all set.
that's amazing.
That's
That was
great.
one of the things we had to do for Howard was to clip out reference and put in a file cabinet. Now you have the internet.
I would have a lot fewer books if I had started my career now.
Yep.
Well, I know that being in Westport, the Westport Library had Robert Fawcett, Albert Dorn, a slew of illustrators, are like clip files in their private. They had a separate room set up
That's cool.
They still have-
for illustrators. Some of the illustrators, like Mark English, he would call in what he needed, and the librarians would pick out the reference. He'd pull up in his car. The librarians would hand him the envelope, and he'd drive off.
Nice.
Well, where was
Yeah.
that when I needed this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me, if I could, I'd like to go back to one of the earlier questions. I'd like to make some kind of fucking contribution here instead of just.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Go, Bill.
Howard's work that he did with Byron, the
Stars My Destiny.
the flowers, the flowers about heaven and shadow, whatever. I forget what it was. There were a number of different ones that he did, and I remember thinking, I mean, it was a real huge influence on me. So it showed that that painted stuff was possible. Although my goal was to try to get subvert the comics themselves, because as opposed to a graphic novel like what Howard was doing with Byron, or with even with Marvel with Love and War, I was trying to get into the actual comics and even take the superhero stuff and try to bring an illustrative quality to it.
Yeah, that's I was talking about bending the material to your will as opposed to being bent by it.
Yep. But how did you know to have the balls to do that? Honestly, unless there was a free for all, maybe in the 1980s, editors gave you a lot more latitude than they do today.
There was a subversive aspect to the editors. If I had tried to come into comics with the style I developed that I sort of pushed towards the New Mutants, I wouldn't have been hired. I actually had to Neil Adams Trojan horse my way in. And then it was I felt like, some kind of weird Edward Snowden meets Hunter Thompson. Right. Once I was in there, it was like, oh, I have the keys to the executive washroom. Let me go in there and just play. Because and I don't know if anybody else has felt this way when they come to some kind of crossroads, but I had certainly with myself with the clone thing. I was in love with comics and also art, but comics were my thing. And I felt like I was either going to do all the kind of comics I wanted to do, or I was going to get out. I mean, Howard mentioned earlier that he had gotten out of the medium and came back to sort of establish, his own real voice. I mean, I think with Flag, I think you really made it not only your own, but with a vengeance. I felt like you kind of came back and really grabbed. I know Walt was doing that on Thor, and I think Dennis was you were pushing into the question at that time, right?
Well, that was a little bit after he got into the.
That was before the question, but what I can say is that there's 3 guys on the panel who totally influenced everything I did after. So between Howard and Walter and Bill, it's kind of formed my life, my artistic life in a way, in a very profound way. I'm looking at that and I'm freaking out a little bit. Howard was the one. Howard and Walter both taught me hard lessons. At one time each or twice each, they sat me down and literally taught me what to do and what not to do and what to look for, what not to look for. I didn't need a lot of lessons, but the ones I got, well, I probably did need a lot, but the ones I got, they were generous enough to give me, meant so much. Howard sat me down after me struggling with V and Vigilante, as good as they were because I was doing stuff. I don't know how they felt about my work, but I know that they would look at it and really criticize it. And not in a mean way, but in a great way. So Howard looked at it and said, basically, looked at my page, took out a piece of trace paper and said, you're doing it all wrong. And I'm like, well, what do you mean I'm doing it all wrong? And he explained to me that comics were about shapes and patterns. And until I started thinking that way, I wasn't going to ever really successfully compose a page. So he taught me what that was, with circles and squares, and literally putting shapes on top of shapes and how that worked, what to look for. What was Alex Toth doing? What were these people doing that I'm not doing that I should be thinking about? Stop thinking about figures. Stop thinking about muscles. Start thinking about space. Start thinking about structure. Walter did the same thing. He sat down and literally, we joke about this a lot, but I was so proud of one story that I had. It was a Power Man Iron Fist story. I was so proud. And it was like, it took place on a roller coaster. And the first page was like this giant roller coaster that I drew. And it was like 22 pages and stuff. I killed myself on it. And I remember seeing Walter, and he was Walt to me because like I was a big deal, So I went up to Walt and said, "Hey, Walt, take a look at this. Tell me what you think." It was so stupid. So Walt actually told me what he thought. It was like, "Oh, you want to know what I think?" Yeah, I want to know what you think. So right in the halls of Marvel, he broke down every panel that was wrong on every page.
Oh,
As looking through it in the halls of Marvel. And I'm thinking, I'm dying here. Because I have to turn this thing in. And it's all wrong. I remember saying to Walt, I have to turn this in. And he was like, well, you'll get it right the next time. I mean, you can turn this is all right to turn it right now. And I'm thinking, no, I'm turning the worst piece of shit ever because I have to. And literally, the pages are still smoking from the criticism. And I'm handing them to Denny O'Neil, stinking like they are. Reeking. And I'm thinking, this is the worst. And Denny's waving the fumes away. And like, and I just remember it going. I just remember thinking.
Here's the sequel to that story.
No
Years
sequel.
later, when we were in Upstart, you guys are next door. You were doing a Batman story. You had a Batman story. I don't know if it was a Sam Hamm script. I can't remember.
Stuff.
Something pretty cool. And you brought the pages over to me to look at. And they were dynamite. They were dynamite pages.
I don't remember any of that.
And that's what I said. I said, these are fabulous. These are fantastic. And you said, you reminded me of looking at the roller coaster job a million years earlier.
Yeah.
And said, that was the kind of reaction I expected back when I showed you the roller coaster job.
Yes, I told you. When I handed it to him, I was like, I was feeling myself. This is really professional work. Man. So anyway, and then Bill, I'm working next to Bill, and he's, and people don't know, but Bill and I have been friends for a very long time. I saw Bill one of the first times he came up to DC Comics, showing his portfolio. I was there when he walked in his jacket and his slacks, right? And his portfolio looking very Westport professional. That's right, baby.
No, that was my little Abner look from New Jersey.
I was sitting in the lobby. I watched this guy walk in his slacks and a sport coat, and it's a young guy, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is wrong with him? Why does he look like that? And it was.
I was wearing pants, and nothing I was wearing was natural fiber. Everything was polyester.
Oh yeah.
And I was wearing a brown suit. I had pants you could play checkers on. Yep. I swear to God.
Yes.
And I had an Eiffel Tower tie.
He was awesome.
Because I remember Alan Weiss going, "Nice tie."
We were all like looking like, okay, so you're the guy. So the other time I met Bill, and this may have been after or before I saw him at DC. I'm up at continuity because I was working continuity. I'm 16 or 17. This is how far back we go. And I was working as an assistant for Neil. I was basically doing what Dean was doing, except less because I didn't have as much talent as Dean. So mostly I got yelled at by Neil for messing things up. So it was great. So I'm sitting right behind him, and Bill walks in. And I guess he had an appointment with Neil to show his portfolio or something. Never forget this. Joe Barney was there. Joe Desposito was there. Mike Nasser was there. And Joe Bro, all those guys. And he comes in and he meets with Bill and he meets with Neil, and Neil opens Bill's portfolio and puts it on a flatbed surface. I'll never forget this. And he's flipping the pages slowly like this. Because Neil says, he's great, be right. Flipping them. And we're all looking like, God. And he's like, occasionally Neil would nod, yeah, see, this one's good. This one's good. And then he gathered us all. He says, come here, look at this. Hey, Dennis, come on, look at this. He goes, you see? And he looks at Bill and he looks at the page and says, this guy's doing you, but he's doing it right. By this time, Mike Nasser was there too. We were all gathered around because Neil had called us all in to look at Bill's portfolio. He's doing me, but he's doing it right. And he looked at kind of NASA pointedly, and he looked at me, and he looked at everybody. And I remember thinking, just fuck this dude. Like,
Exactly.
it was like I was thinking he's so great. I was thinking, what the fuck he's coming up here for? Now Neil's like, this is my new son. I've been working with him. Mike Nash is asked out. Mike Nash was really asked out, like, just fuck all this. And I'm like, I remember thinking, this polyester suit just came up here and just blew us all away. And I remember Neil Adams picking up the phone. I remember him picking up the phone while Bill was there and calling Jim Shooter and saying, I'm going to send this guy to see you. His name is Sienkiewicz. That's how you say it? Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm going to send him right now. Yeah, he's coming down. You're going down right now. He's coming down right now. I was there, baby. I remember all that. And I remember also thinking, Neil ain't never called up nobody for me to send me nowhere except to go get him something, like go pick this up at the store. That's the only thing he ever had me do. He ain't never sent me nowhere.
Oh my God.
Like, oh God. But it was, you made a splash that day that I never forgot. Because
it was a pretty
in front of everybody.
time.
And then he would go on to be your regular anchor. But I do want Walter briefly to tell us what you were working on in 1985.
Thor.
Is that when you'd been working on Thor for a little while? Was that when you introduced the frog?
That'd be about right. I was a couple of years in. I started in '83. So what's that? 24 issues. That's probably about the time the frog story showed up. And it was really, you mentioned earlier we were talking about something went by about editorial and freedom and whatever. And I was just going to say about that is that it seemed to me at that time, up until about 1990, I've said this before, creativity in comics to me was more or less bottom up. You got a book, you could do what you wanted with it. Now, I mean within the limits of mainstream comics, because I was working at Marvel and DC mostly. But you really had that book, and you were on your own. After that, once crossover started coming in, creativity began being top down, and as a result, I think less interesting to me anyway, as a guy writing stories. But at that time, when I did the frog story, nobody said boo. I mean, I presented it to Ralph, who was my editor at the time, Ralph Macchio. I don't think I heard from Jim Shooter on it, really. It came out. The only time I talked to Shooter, I was going to do, right when I was getting off the book, I did an all splash page issue where Thor fights the Midgard Serpent. And I was trying to figure out some way to do that story because Thor was going to be so small and the Serpent was so big. And eventually I decided that all splash pages would do it. But I wasn't sure that was going to be received. At that point, John Byrne had done an all splash page issue of the Hulk, but it hadn't been printed. He'd gotten a contretemps with Denny about that, and I think he got off the book. And that story had not come out yet. Eventually, Alan Milgram published it in, what was that, Marvel?
Fanfare?
It was in Fanfare. But it hadn't come out yet. I hadn't seen it, but I knew it existed. And I had the idea to do an all-splash page issue. I wasn't sure if Jim would be amenable to that at the time. By that time, he was kind of exercising more oversight on the books than he had earlier. And so I stopped by his office. I just I poked my head in. You're in the office a lot back in those days. Poked my head in. He wasn't busy. He wasn't talking to anybody right then. And I told him what I had in mind with my usual enthusiasm and gusto. And he just said, sounds great. And that was, it was kind of an inoculation against having any problem later on down the road. But it worked out fine, and the issue came out well. So my run on Thor, that was a book when I first took it over. Mark Grunwald was the editor. And Mark told me I had carte blanche to do whatever I wanted with it. It wasn't selling very well, which meant that, the good part about that was if I'd taken over the book and it tanked, they'd just say, oh, well, that book was going down the tubes anyway. Too bad. If it did well, they'd say, wow, Simonson, what a genius.
Exactly.
I'm not sure I quite made the genius level, but I did end up, it sold well, and that was that. But I really did. I've never had a book in mainstream since then, or before that, really, where I had carte blanche. I mean,
what about Orion? What about
Hunter and Archie? But Archie was the editor, so.
What about Orion? I thought that was such a great.
More or less. I mean, I did have to do a Joker crossover in the middle of it. because they were doing crossovers, and it was like, okay, this month you're doing a Joker crossover.
Okay.
And I came up with a story I really like, so I did 2 issues on it. I
Right.
said, screw it, I'll just do
Right.
2 issues on this. And I used a lot of Kirby stuff, but that one I had a lot of freedom on that. But that was also, nobody cared about Orion at DC. I mean, it was, DC. The new guys have never done very well there, the fourth world stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I got 2 years out of it. Had a great time. One of my favorite books to do. I have a feeling that the second year I was doing it, it was probably losing money for DC, but they let me keep doing it. And then finally, how did this work? My publisher, my editor, and somebody else, I was a group editor. I don't remember how DC was structured, but Paul Levitz and Mike Carlin and somebody else. He went over to DC and Marvel eventually. They took me out to lunch to tell me they were canceling the book. And I have to say, it was very nice to have, as opposed to finding a message on your answering machine or maybe a email. Your book's dead. Go away.
Right.
It was very kind of them to do that. And so, and they gave me about 4 issues to wrap it all up.
Right.
I think Paul kind of blanched. I said, I need probably 4 more to get everything finished. And he kind of went, ugh. But then they let me have them, and it worked out pretty well.
Right.
It's interesting that you say that. I was just thinking about what everybody was doing in 1985 as compared to now, where, like what you mentioned about top down, bottom up. I mean, I don't necessarily feel that the editors are really necessarily editors anymore. I feel like they're more glorified traffic managers to kind of keep the, the wheels on the train of the licensing, so to speak. Because there was a lot, 85, 84, 85, 86. I mean, that was such an amazing time. I mean, everything. I mean, I remember when you did Beta Ray, Bill, and then the Frog. It's like, like just that kind of sent ripples through Marvel. I still remember, people's response, and then with Flag, that, because that got on everybody's radar, and I know obviously with Frank we did with Dark Knight and everything.
It was Flag, Thor, and Daredevil. That's what.
Was it Daredevil? That's right.
Daredevil at the time. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. No, you're right.
One of the things we really have to remember.
While I'm working. Sorry, Howard.
Oh, sure. Finish that.
No, I was saying I was just working in comics, but I remember being influenced by that stuff while I was working in comics. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I totally agree. Yeah.
One of the things that has to be confirmed,
everybody,
is that we were all living in the same place. We saw each other all the time.
Every day.
It was the last time that was the case, because Federal Express began to change the way, well before the internet. People were no longer required to live in the city. Sure. And we were very much a real community,
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody. Everybody has stories. Everybody had experiences. We ate together. We drank together. We partied together.
We messed up.
It was distinctly community
together.
Say what?
They said we messed up together. We got mad at each other together.
We
did. All of it.
It was an affordable life.
I mean, part of it also, one of the things I really miss about those days is that it was great to go to the office. You had to take your pages in because you weren't scanning stuff yet.
Right.
You took your pages in, which means you bumped into Dennis or Howard or Bill or 85 other guys, and they all had work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the original art these guys were doing. The one instance that blew me away was when I was first in comics. I came into the DC coffee room. Bernie was there, and Bernie's one of the guys. Bernie, Howard, Mike Kaluta, and probably Dan Green were the first 4 guys I met on the first day I walked into DC.
I think Weiss was there too.
Looking for work.
Bernie Wrightson, yeah.
Might have been Weiss was there as well.
What's that?
Weiss was there as well.
Okay, maybe it was Alan then. And but shortly thereafter, you'd go into the coffee room, you talk to your contemporaries, you see work, and Bernie was doing Swamp Thing, and he pulled out Swamp Thing 4, I think it was, and there's an interior splash of a werewolf in there with a guy's head down, but really the guy would be standing in the basement because it was way low for the perspective, but it worked. It was Bernie. It worked great, and there was this great full figure of a werewolf with his back legs in that kind of Z shape. A lot of zipatone on it, and it looked fantastic. And it was really, I think Howard said elsewhere that, Bernie really set the bar pretty much for the rest of us. And it was just, you'd look at it and you go, oh, crap. Now I got to go home and work harder. So we never caught him, but it was just amazing to be able to walk into the office and see that kind of stuff. And it was very encouraging. It was intimidating. And it really made you want to go back to your studio and work harder.
Would you say that
when we're talking here, Frank was doing Daredevil, Howard was doing American Flag, and I was doing Thor, all at the same time at Upstart in that one room, which is pretty cool.
And Bill was on New Mutants and doing Electra Assassin. I mean, again, the proximity, I think, is what we're talking about. Created a certain kind of healthy competition, I would almost say, that made you guys work harder and stronger. Would you say?
I certainly was the case for me. I mean, I remember when, Howard and I think we've mellowed a bit. I mean, I think during, I have nothing but love and respect for the man. But I remember there were some, in our younger days, there was a lot of contentious sort of back and forth.
Each other's throats, baby.
What's that?
Assholes.
We went for each other's throats.
Yeah, we did. And it was, and the thing is that, I mean, we lived and breathed it, and it was like, it was passion, It was,
and it wasn't competition for me. It was resentment, I'm serious. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
I mean, I felt that. I mean, like Walker said, Wrightson set this bar that was none of us were able to attend. You couldn't compete with that. And there were guys that, I mean, like Bill and I did a thing last year, or sometime in the dim past before the shit hit the fan, at Cal Arts, called Vulgar Shenanigans.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And we just had a gas. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's really amazing when you kind of get a little bit more maturity under the belt, and you kind of realize it's like a lot of the stuff that seemed important so much longer, so much a while ago is kind of like literally water under the bridge. But
but there are still people I would rather see dead. So just be aware.
No. I think we can all name at least one or two. But yeah, that is true. I mean, we were all we would see each other. Now it's like, even with social media and people posting stuff all the time, it's sort of the public, square in a way, but it's not quite the same as holding this stuff in your hands and
walking
seeing
down
it.
Third Avenue wearing a Velcro snap red Superman cape with Frank Miller walking 3 feet behind me, so no one would know that he was with me. You can't get that on social media, man.
Also, I remember my first year or two. The first year, I think, when DC was still over at 909 Third Avenue, 909 Lexington, wherever it was,
from the Blarney Rose.
And I remember that, and there was also there were still Wienerwalds back in the city back in those days, which was a restaurant, chicken and German food, maybe, I don't remember, but we used to go there every so often, so that you not only got to look at the pages people were doing and could be excited about them, but you'd bump into your friends. Continuity was like a boys' club. For
just thinking about continuity, because from DC, you walk over to continuity.
Yep, and Marvel the same way. You could walk to continuity. Yep. And so then you'd go out at night. Neil taught me the beauties of a bacon cheeseburger, which I never eat anymore. There used to be a restaurant called the Channel 4 Restaurant down 48th Street. But it was really the communal aspect of it. It was partly professional. It was partly family, and that was it was. We often talk about that, not often, but occasionally talk about the fact we feel we came through comics at an absolutely fabulous time to be in comics.
Yeah,
which will not be replicated.
Going to lunch at Kenby's with Jack Abel, when what's her name from the Facts of Life would come in and work the room. Jack calling the waitress George Washington. Just brutal. It was just brutal. Larry and Ralph, Paul Kirchner, all these guys, we were all of the same age. We were incredibly vital, to a certain extent, hostile, and just, it was the equivalent of what stand-up comics go through, trying to literally one-up. And it was,
I think it's with stand-up comedy, it's they shit-talk each other brutally, and that's a sign of affection,
Absolutely.
It's like you're kind of in the family.
Speaking of, I knew that I was, I don't know, grandfathered in or well liked or loved because of a prank that was pulled on me. I don't know if Howard wants to tell the story or Walter wants to tell the story.
Well, I'm not sure. I think you should tell the story.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
Dan.
I can tell a part.
And I want to say here and now, before this is told, I really held my own against Walter doing this.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Walter, do you remember that?
I cringed through it all because I
remember, like, I had never seen
so much.
I had never seen Walter get angry. I thought he was like the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood of comics. You know, like
You're gonna ask Howard about that later.
he was the nicest guy ever. And I remember, like,
I see what used to be filing cabinets, babe.
you saw filing, that's right. And they had a record player, and they would play like Warren Zevon and Van Morrison, right, and other stuff. And I guess I brought in a Prince record. It was a 45 of Little Red Corvette. And once in a while, they'd be like, Dean, you could put your song on, So I was like, thank you. It's really sweet. And then there was one day where, like, I don't know if it was Walter or Howard just kept suggesting I put that song on again. Just go ahead. You should play it. You should play it. And I was like, why? Like, you guys don't like Prince or whatever. You're always making fun of me. And then I decided, okay, I put on the 45. It's playing Little Red Corvette. I go back. I'm working on backgrounds on Flag. And I start to hear like sniffling or something. And I look to my right and I see like Larry and Howard both have their like faces against the boards, kind of just laughing, kind of like to themselves. I'm like, what's so funny? And then I hear like this, like a chair pull back and a stomping sound. And it's Walter getting really physical and, abrasive and loud. And he starts screaming how he fucking hates this song. Why are you playing this song? Like, and I don't know what to do because it's just a Prince song. What did I do? And I was told to put it on, and he goes over to the record player, and I'll never forget this sound. I mean, you see it in the movies, right? It was a scratch, just destroying my record. Like, and then he takes the record out, and how do you describe it? A widow? No,
I folded in quarters or whatever.
He folded the record into quarters, and it was like watching, like he was hulking out. It was like Bruce Banner emerging into a Hulk, and I didn't know what to do. And again, I'm looking at Larry and Howard. Kind of, are they laughing? What are they doing? Like, I don't understand what's happening. And I just turned around and I just went to like this robot mode of inking, like. I don't even know if I was afraid. I was just something was going on. And then I hear,
I think it's called
turn around, Dean. Turn around. I got something. I got to show you something. I've got something for you. And he pulls out his portfolio and pulls out a 12-inch version of Little Red Corvette, like the big long play with another B-side or whatever. And then everyone starts laughing. And my heart is just palpitating. And then I knew that these guys loved me. And I kept that
a world of abuse taught you that lesson.
That's right. I kept that 45. I nailed it to above my art table. I remember, and right. It was kind of an heirloom, or like this sign of. So that was a beautiful moment. But I'd never seen Walter get so angry. I was like, afterwards I was like, what a great actor. But apparently Walter gets mad sometimes. So I don't know. Sometimes that's how you get mad. No, one of the things I want to talk to you guys about. And maybe this is too heady a question, because one of the things I wanted to ask was, Howard, don't get upset that I'm putting glasses on. I'm getting old here. One of my questions was, what was the comic book industry like in 1985? But you've kind of been saying what it was like. Because again, a 17-year-old turning 18, coming to be an assistant, I didn't know the business of comics. I didn't know what the industry was like. If you have anything more to say about that, please. Otherwise, I have another question. Does anybody have a thought?
So much of what I think was being tried certainly by me at the time was based on naivete and sort of enthusiasm. Like I was too ignorant to know what could or couldn't be done. Right. And a lot of the prohibitions that were coming from the editorial, like the old edict of no green covers or whatever. Like I was fine if they brought a rule or a guideline that made sense, but none of them seemed to. They were all just seemed like completely arbitrary. So it was just going along and just seeing what worked. Kind of, because I think we all find our own way. It's like because that is one thing that as sort of universal as comics are, they certainly are absolutely more like solo artists.
Well, I remember like a cover you did for New Mutants. Like I think it had staples and like masking tape on. Like you had broken a piece of art and taped it back onto the cover. It was I don't know if I
that was actually it was a Legion cover for New Mutants. I found there was a headshot of the actor James Caan for some movie, and what I did was I Xeroxed it a bunch of times to degrade it, and so it stopped looking like him. And then I manipulated it, and then I pasted that down on the art and just taped and stapled and sort of Kurt Schwittered it up,
And then you created a character through Legion, I believe, that never looked the same twice.
Oh, that Warlock, yeah.
Warlock.
Well, I think I was tired of all of the academic stuff of because I used to drill myself in grammar school with anatomy. I was reading like anatomy, like of course there was Bridgman, but there was another artist named Victor Perard where all of the muscles would attach and everything else. And I remember I would study the anatomy and then I would close the book and I would try to draw from memory and I would see how I would retain it, how much I would retain it. So when I finally came to doing Warlock, I was like, I'm going to create a character that's more like jazz. It's like, or more musical, where it's like there is no anatomy. It's like if you want to put the head up here, put the head up here. It's like it was really about more like cartooning in a sense.
Right.
So and in a way, I feel like the characters become more of a Rorschach test for artists than Rorschach, the character Rorschach, because the way I draw it is different than the way any of these other gentlemen would draw it, or the way Arthur Adams or yourself. I was
gonna say, I think I've seen artists draw Warlock where they've tried to make sense of him and it doesn't look right. Like it needs to be so skewed, almost like you dip your elbow in ink and smear the paper and then add some, chaos to it, but also what was interesting is coming to that room and like Walter and Howard are writing their comics. And we all know in comics, drawing, image is text. So you're actually, as an artist, you are also a writer, of sorts, right? Because you're conveying story through image. But these guys were already like, solidly writing and drawing their stories or drawing what they would write. But Bill, you came to like write Stray Toasters, I guess shortly thereafter.
It was in, I think, 90.
In 90?
Like 89 or 90, somewhere in there.
And Dennis, I don't think have you ever written a comic?
No. I've contributed to a lot of comics that way, but I've never written my own comic. I should though, right? But I've never.
Yeah.
I've never. But I, we work with writers all the time. At Milestone, that's all we did.
Right.
Was work with Dwayne and Christopher Priest and all those guys.
Kind of like a writer's room, they would call it today, right? Like,
yeah. We're doing that to this day with all the
working
with the writers and stuff. So
one of the things I want to ask you, Dennis, was I wasn't always privy to conversation in the room with you, Bill, and Michael Davis, but were you ever talking to Michael about more Black representation in comics or anything like that?
Back then in the 80s and at that time, was just probably at the very beginning of me having any kind of awareness about anything, if even that. When I was up at next to Upstarts in that studio, I think I was just still trying to figure out, one, what is this world of comics about? I had been in it at that time since I was 14. I was like 24 then. I'd already been doing it for 10 years, but I was still trying to really figure out what it was about and didn't know myself at all. It wasn't until so I didn't talk to Michael about any of that stuff, passing, on the most superficial level.
Sure.
And I'm not even sure, even at that age, how aware I was of the systemic, stuff that was going on, even in comics. And, And in the world, I had no real grasp, but when I did, everything changed profoundly for me.
Yeah. Well, I know that when I think there were times when you were out, Dennis, like when it was Michael and I working at the studio, and he and I would just talk back and forth, really about art and comics. And then when you were there, it was like the subject really of the sort of representation that really you did with Milestone. That really didn't come up at the time until we were all just working stiffs, trying to like find our way.
Right.
You know?
And the other thing I was going to point out was that Howard's doing Flag and Walter's doing Thor, and you're doing New Mutants, and I'm doing V or whatever. But it wasn't like this was, and Frank's doing Daredevil, but it wasn't like anyone thought we're doing extraordinary stuff that we're not going to be doing later. It was art. It was what we were doing at the time. Doesn't mean we're passionate about it, but it was always going to be like, this is what we did. You know, it was just things of what we did. It wasn't like, we know this is a special time and it'll never be replicated again. Right. That's not okay. And so anything I was thinking back then was all transactional, young, stupid, energetic, boneheaded stuff. But it certainly wasn't any kind of awareness about.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, we were all guys, I think, who were really lucky to. I think we shared the idea that we were lucky to have a job that was basically making a vocation of our avocation.
Yep.
We were hobbyists making a living from our hobby, basically. Yep. And there's a lot of look. We were the luckiest sons of bitches walking.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, we were being paid to learn. I mean, that's how I viewed it for a while. To take chances.
We were also among the last generation of artists who, like you were, Dean, who had assistants, who were assistants, to different artists. Like that whole thing is gone, but we had that way over time. We had a lot of.
I worked for Woody. I worked for Gil. And I worked for Greg.
I worked for Gil. I worked for Rich. I did a lot of different stuff, and all that helped. All that was preparing you to be a professional, and even then, you still couldn't really do it until you were doing it for years.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing. You're talking about 1985. One of the major differences then than say in the 70s. Where, the distribution aside, because that was a major thing for comics when the direct market got underway. But I think one of the things by 85, that was about 3 years into royalties.
Yes.
And before that, you were being paid piecework per page, whether it was lettering or coloring or writing or drawing. And when royalties came in 82, that my income went up by a third. It's gone back down again now, so just it didn't. But it did. I ended up. I was on the X-Men Teen Titans crossover at the time the decision was made to start royalties. In fact, I'd had a discussion. Chris and Terry and I had talked to Jim Shooter because we knew that the book was going to sell really well. Trained monkeys could have drawn that book; it would have been fine. It would have sold a lot of copies. And we asked about getting royalties in the book. Having royalties would be a good plan. And it was explained to us that, well, there just wasn't really enough money in comics for royalties to be given out to freelancers. That the business would go under, and that would be the end of it. So we should be grateful for what we had, more or less. I don't remember his exact words, but that was the idea, that there wasn't enough money for royalties. And then somewhere in there, DC instituted a royalty plan. That was probably Paul Levitz and maybe Jeanette, perhaps, and maybe Orlando. They were kind of the triumvirate for a while. And within 3 or 4 days, Shooter and Mike Hobson had instituted a similar royalty plan at DC. And the result was it went in before we'd finished the X-Men Teen Titans. So we got really nice checks. And strangely enough, the industry did not collapse after we were paid that money. But I think it made a difference. In some ways, it may have made freelancers a bit more cutthroat. Because before
I was going to say that it did change the whole paradigm. I think everybody started to vie for the higher profile stuff, And I think, I don't know if it was the royalties, but I think Marvel had some kind of plan in place before that, which I think they called it the incentives.
The incentive program.
Yeah, which is where, like, if you stayed on for 10 issues or something like that, you got a certain amount.
Yeah, bonus.
The bonus system or whatever. But but there have been a couple of those markers along the way. I remember when all the guys left to start Image, and then Marvel's stock fell, and I remember one, the fact that there was a stock on Marvel, and two, I thought that the business or the medium, it was going to change everything. So, you know, the more corporatization that kind of came into, you know, the clubhouse, so to speak, became a little bit more pervasive.
And also, in the 70s, comics was kind of a small business. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't that much money floating around anyway. And
right.
that changed over time. I don't know how it is so much for mainstream because there's so many more comics now. But they certainly generated, thanks to movies, billions of dollars. It's a very different industry than it was back when we were all kids doing the work.
Well, the billions that are being generated, having grown up, I think we can all sort of remember the contempt and that comics were sort of viewed with by the vast majority of people, sort of the juvenile medium, blah blah blah, and having had some experience with the corporate side of things and the cinematic side of things, I guess Marvel and Disney have made billions of dollars on their films, but very, very little of that money is taken from that department and translated to comics. There is a segmentation and a bifurcation of the sort of corporate structure, and I think, it's speculative on my part, but I do feel that a lot of the powers that be on the cinematic side sort of view the comics side of things, one, as research and development, and also with a certain level of the same kind of, askance look that we kind of grew up with. It's like it's the crazy kids over there, but we're the grown-ups. Let us take it. We know what to do with it.
Hollywood is basically made up of the guys who used to beat the shit out of us for reading comic books in grammar school, now making money off the fucking stuff.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Well, with this in mind, that kind of, I wrote a question that kind of discusses this a little bit. So again, put on your 1985 hat.
Well, I'm going to have to put on my have to go to dinner hat pretty soon. So
yeah. Okay, couple minutes. Where did you imagine the comic book industry would wind up, and what actually happened to your career 35 years later?
What?
In other words, in 1985, where did you think the comics industry was going to go, and what was going to be like? And then course corrected with what actually happened.
In 1985, I literally thought things were always going to be like this, like forever. Like, this perfect world where I was going to have a studio next to Howard's studio, and I was going to have a studio with Bill, and Michael and I are going to be pals, and hopefully I would get a regular book, and that was probably as far as I took it.
Right.
I certainly wasn't thinking 35 years. In 35 years, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I probably had aspirations of being like Garcia Lopez or somebody, or like Howard, or like that. That was it, and if I could achieve that, I was going to do well. What happened subsequently was as much a surprise to me as anybody else, but I certainly didn't. I wasn't thinking 35.
You weren't thinking too far ahead.
No.
Any of you guys, do you think way ahead? Like, was there going to be an industry still?
Well, I'm still hoping to be like Jose Garcia Lopez before.
Yeah, right.
So I'm still working on that.
I used to see him working every day at DC because he used to stay in Andy Helper's office working on his pages. Ross Andrew would work the next office over, and Ross Andrew would flip his pages over backwards and do them reversed.
Oh.
Flip them over and draw them the right way with a light box. I was like, yes. I watched him do it numerous times. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, this is the way he's going to make sure that all the proportions are right and everything's right. So he drew it backwards.
Yeah.
Flip it over, light box it, do it right. I'm like,
That's not the Sienkiewicz way. That is not the Sienkiewicz way.
And I blew town in '85 because, as I've said publicly recently, I had no prospects, and that there was a potential I was going to get this old and I better do something about it. I had no idea what that was, but I recognized that I had to do something because I did not have a footprint that was going to be commercially successful enough for me to be alive and not a drag on a system at any point after retirement age. And so I came out west because I had some interest, and I ended up in television, worked on shit, never worked on a show I'd watch, but made a solid living, bought real estate, and got a pension. And so I don't live, and I never lived like it was going to be forever. I sort of, at a certain point in my life when I hit my early 40s, I recognized the fact that things were not going to be going my way all the time. And then I better take care, and I did, and I transformed a lot of aspects of my life. But I've always, here I am. I'm 70 years old, and I'm still doing the same shit I was doing when I was 20, and happily so. I draw the same pleasure from making them as I once did from reading them. And I'm grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's pretty much the same for me. It's that it still remains perennially green for me. My goal is, as a kid, when I was 7 years old, and I told my father that I was going to draw comics, for a living. All I ever wanted to do was just draw comics. Any of the other stuff in terms of trying different mediums or whatever, I felt like once I was going to do comics, then that was the way it was going to be for the rest of my life, and of course, that old bromide about, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. It's everybody, it's like, has had their own bizarre, circuitous path. I remember once early on, when I first started trying to get into illustration and, dabbling in that. I remember the rep that I had, it was for some kind of hotel chain, and it had to do with a number of different international flags, and it was a pretty big money job. But I lost out to Bart Forbes, and I remember not being upset that I didn't get the gig. I remember really being thrilled because I was now getting rejected for gigs that I never would have actually been even considered for. So it's like, hopefully that it comes down to the point where you actually start getting the gigs, but you're kind of in the big leagues, and or out from the minors.
Yeah, Bart Forbes beat you out.
I felt when I was young, when I got into comics, Howard will verify this. In the 70s, we all thought comics was a dying business. We all thought in 10 years it was going to be dead. And we loved comics, and we wanted to do them while they were still around. So we thought we'd try to get into the business, do it now. And at some point down the road, we'd have to get jobs like real adults. But we'd still have a chance to do comics while they were around. The direct market happened, other stuff happened, and comics didn't die. Not then anyway. And that's about the time I quit prognosticating on how the industry was going to go. I said, okay, I really have no idea. So, but I like doing comics. In some ways, I like working alone. I love being in a studio with other guys working on their stuff around me. I could see what was going on, and you can feed off each other's energy. But I really like having my drawing board right here in front of me, my reference, stuff like that. And I've been lucky enough to get work for longer than I would ever have thought possible. I still get some. So I'm happy to keep doing it. I would like to do it as long as I can. One of the stories I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, I haven't bothered to look it up, is that Maxfield Parrish died at about the age of 96, I believe. And he quit painting at about the age of 90 because at that age, he was a little shaky. And so he couldn't paint the way he saw the paintings. So he retired. And I would like to retire or not when I'm no longer able to do the kind of work that I do. It doesn't meet whatever standards. On the other hand, oh man, I always forget who it is. Is it Matisse? Who did the giant abstract?
That was Matisse.
That Matisse?
The water lilies.
Well, that, but he also did, at the end of his life, he was doing big abstracts. They were cut paper. He would color the paper, and then he would cut them out, and he'd paste them all together, and these almost like these giant banners.
Yeah.
And in the books, they don't look so impressive because they're like this big. But there was a Matisse show in New York millions of years ago, and these things are hanging from the ceiling. They're gigantic, and they're just phenomenal. And apparently when he was doing those as an old man and an old ill man, he would lie in bed as he was ill, and he had a maul stick, and he would have his assistant paint the paper the way he wanted it painted, and then cut it, direct how it should be cut. And then he would push the piece of paper with the maul stick around the bottom sheet until he got it where he wanted it, and have the guy glue it down. And this is really on essentially, I gather, on his deathbed. I mean, just at his final illnesses. And I thought, no, I'd be kicking and screaming on the way out. I will not be so cool as to be able to do that. But I thought, well, that was just incredibly cool. And an artist who found a way to do the work he loved as all the way through. And that would be nice. I had my brothers. That's what I would do. The business would change around me. It's changed around me a ton so far. Still have work, still happy to do it, but I don't prognosticate how this is all going to work out in the end. I would accept that I know that all the stuff, that a lot of the stuff I've done, even this crappy newsprint from Manhunter from 1973, that is going to outlast me. Some of those issues are still going to be around yellow when I'm long gone.
Don't mention Star Wars to Howard, though.
Look, I've already written my New York Times obit. Cartoonist Howard Chaykin dies. Fucked up Star Wars comics.
There you go.
Howard Chaykin knows for his Star Wars.
I miss having my assistants in the house. I mean, my office, my studio down here. I like the idea of having two guys to yell at and be yelled at by. Laurel is convinced I play my music to annoy my assistants. She's entitled to believe this. And I truly do miss having Calvin and Ramon around. I worked for years alone when I first moved to California, and then I had a studio with Vosberg and Don Cameron and Sean McManus, which is a really febrile enterprise. And I live up in Walter's been to my place. Dennis been to my place. I live in a beach town. I'm the luckiest motherfucker, Walter.
It's swell. It's just.
And my office, my studio is dynamite. It's great, but I miss having my boys.
Well, that was going to be a question I had for you guys: is do you miss the studio environment? And for those of you who still use assistants, what is the difference from 1985 and 2020 besides Photoshop? But
it's mostly Photoshop. It's mostly
Well, I had I've been really fortunate in terms of batting 2 out of 3. I mean, you and Amanda Connor were, really, it's really gratifying and to see, assistants go on to, just crush it, and just blow everybody out of the water, and certainly, but I did have one assistant who shall remain nameless, who it was a little bit of kind of an All About Eve scenario where it was like, the Robert Ford movie. It's like, I can't tell if you want to be like me or if you want to be me, and so that kind of
I wanted to be you, Bill.
Yeah, you wanted to be you.
And I want you to just
about us.
spell the name. Nobody will know.
Yeah, he's just
I will refrain from mentioning the name because I actually had to he left a vicious stalker-esque voicemail back when there were tape machines, and I ended up having to call the police based on it. So it was I'm gonna just let that slide because I don't need a bunny boiler,
Email us later.
Yeah, surrogacy is not worth the time.
when I moved out here, it's like I've been used to being by myself, but having bought the house and it, you know, like in the slow process of moving in, it's actually, of course, this is before COVID, but I mean, one of the ideas of getting a larger place is actually to be able to have artists come in and work in a very cool environment, and to bring back some of that communal aspect. I mean, when I was in Westport, I had a studio at home, but I also had a studio where I worked with Stan Drake, Johnny Prentice, Leonard Starr, you know, and Frank Boll Jr. was there as well. And, you know, and comic artists would go out to lunch. I mean, you know, Gil Fox would talk about his days knowing Jack, you know, how he'd go to Jack Cole's house and Cole would have all of the windows shuttered because, you know, all of the heroin fucked up his eyes, you know, those kinds of stories. So it was like a comic strip Babylon, you know. But I love the idea of actually being around other artists and, you know, and having an assistant because, but in a weird way, it's like I'm so used to being by myself. It's almost like I have to get back into the swing of things, you know.
Dennis,
I mean,
did you ever?
Dennis and I used to work in Westport. We'd come to the studio and
I take the train up and we'd hang out. I hang up at Bill's place days, 3 or 4 days, and we'd be working in the studio, going out, get something, go to the gym, you know, work some more. I mean, like I said, it was going to be like that forever. So
right, and you guys are such great collaborators. And I guess this will be like a final question. I think, Howard, you have to split for dinner soon, right?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, I missed the 4:30 special at Wolfie's, man. You know.
Oh, okay. I mean, my wife just we're having takeout tonight. We're having okay.
time.
Well, going back to 1985. I don't know how many people know this, but you, Howard, and Walter were asked to pitch to do Superman, and you both had, I think, very different takes. And if you don't mind telling the folks about your Superman ideas, and while you're doing that, to invite Dennis and Bill to just kind of make up what they would do with Superman would be kind of cool too. So,
well, I'm going to go first because I'm going to get out of here after.
Okay.
But I came in and I was, you know, I was full of piss and vinegar, and my pitch basically consisted of a 3 or 4 page sequence of Metropolis waking up. And everybody's just getting ready to go and busy at doing their shit and everything else. And we follow Clark Kent, and we see him getting out of bed. But then we see a double page spread of everybody reacting. The sound of, and this is it, a tone deaf version of "You've Got the Cool, Clear Eyes of a Seeker of Wisdom and Truth." That's like a sonic boom across the city. And it turns out in that splash is we see Superman wearing a Walkman, like the old days of Walkman, singing to the Frank Lesser soundtrack of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And he's flying across the city. He gets to the Daily Planet, gets to the storage room, changes into his Clark Kent outfit, and we realize very rapidly that everybody in Metropolis knows that Clark Kent is Superman. But they are so glad to have him, they're willing to allow him to believe that they don't know.
That's so great.
That's great.
Needless to say, powers that be of DC Comics looked like a Munch painting. You know,
that's beautiful.
Exactly.
I could just hear you gleefully pitching it too.
Oh, I had a good time.
You're just all in it.
You know. Well, gentlemen, I was booked till 6, so it's 6:30. I got to go. My beautiful wife is standing here.
Hello, beautiful. Hey, let's see you.
Hey, Sugar. How you doing, Valerie?
Hello.
Good to see you.
The woman who owns my ass.
That's
What
right.
And
Get
Well,
to
you
work.
should.
Do your job.
get to work. All right, I'm out.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Great
Good
to see you.
pal.
Great to see you, Howard. Mwah.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Love you.
Matt, gentlemen, this has been the best hour and a half I've spent in weeks, and I was regretting the fact that I had no second wind and hoping I wouldn't. This is giving me a second wind, so it's going to be keeping me up all night. Fuck that.
Awesome.
Get going.
Be well, man.
Love
Hopefully
to
we'll
all.
see.
Sure.
Hopefully we'll see you, soon, like in real time, real life.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic, but I'll go along with cockeyed optimism. I'm with you.
Okay,
baby.
why not?
Hey,
All right, have a
safe,
great
all.
evening.
Later, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Peace out.
can I go too?
You can go. You can go if you got to go. I want to hear Walter Superman
I'm
though.
still having it, Dennis. Can I go too?
You
All
can
right.
Dennis, take care.
No.
Stay for 1 second. Go ahead. I want to hear the story.
hear the story. Hear the
Here's
story. Then
here's
we'll wrap
the
it
deal on
up.
that. I didn't have a pitch. I mean, not the way Howard did. I want how this actually worked. Andy Helfer was the editor of Superman at the time. This has got to be before Byrne did Superman, so 85 is probably about right, somewhere in there. And he asked me to go out to lunch with him one day, and we went out to lunch, and we talked about a lot of stuff. I don't remember most of it. Superman came up, and in the course of talking about Superman, my memory of it is not that Andy offered me the project, the book, or offered me or wanted a pitch. My memory of it is we talked about it some, and it must have included the general idea, if I were going to do it, what would I want? And I gave him 3 figures. I said I would this much money. I was doing Thor at the time. It was doing well. For this much money, I would not do it. For this much money, I would totally do it. And for a figure right in the middle, I'd have to think about it. I might or might not do it. I don't know. And that's what I remember, the extent of our discussion about Superman. A couple of days later, I'm in the DC offices, and I run into Pat Bastien, who used to work with Dick Giordano. I love Pat. And she was over there at DC, because Dick was over there then. And she says to me, as we're passing by in the hallway, says, "So I hear you turned down Superman." And I said, "Not that I know of, but maybe." And that was, I will, I don't know if I want to tell that story or not. Yeah, maybe I won't tell that story. I was recruited by Jeanette, but I didn't jump on that one. I didn't decide to do it. So, and once again, it was kind of the way DC at that time, at least for me, DC, like this lunch with Andy, you wouldn't know what the score was. Like, I'm not a bright guy. So if you're going to offer me work, you kind of have to say, "Hey, Walt, we'd like to offer you work," as opposed to saying, and then trail off in the distance.
Right.
Because it's just going to go like that. So that was kind of how the recruiting day evening went down as well. Weezy was with me. It was a dinner. Weezy was with me. We understood what it was about, really. I mean, it was totally clear what was going on. But there was no actual offer made. Like, if you come work for us, this will happen. And, I was doing okay elsewhere. And, that's kind of, I wasn't really pie in the sky, I don't suppose. But it was indirect enough and indistinct enough that it was not a tempting offer.
Right.
But it made for a great evening. I will tell you guys about some other time we aren't online.
But you did have an idea. Do you remember the idea?
I did. I thought about it some, and the idea I had, and I don't have. All I have is the basic idea. I do not have any idea where I was going to go with it. I don't know if I had more of it or not. All I remember now is that one of the days we were going to wake up, kind of like Howard's idea, except that the other side, the other way around. We were going to discover that Superman, all the stuff you knew about him, well, the readers knew about him. Presumably, people didn't know about it. But the little rocket ship, the escape from Krypton, the destruction of Krypton, the growing up with the Kents, coming to Metropolis, all that stuff, none of it was true.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how issue 1 would end.
That kind of stuff has been done a million times since then.
Right.
Superman, maybe it was Superman by now, I don't know.
Right.
So it was more of I think, an original idea at that time. Whether I would have had the balls to really, in the end of the first year or two, made it stick, I don't know. But also because Superman is such a licensed character, there were a lot of other aspects of it in the licensing that I presume would have prevented that sort of thing.
Sure. Or you do it for a year. You do it for a year, and then
do it for a year.
Yeah.
But that was my idea for where the story would start.
Right.
So
because then Louise would go kill Superman later.
well, she did. But I will say and that was like in '92 or so, that when that happened, originally what was going to happen was that the Superman, we had a team of guys people doing Superman.
Right.
Dan Jurgens, John Bogdanov, artists and writers. There were 4 books a month. I think Mike Carlin was probably the only editor on God's Green Earth who could have driven those disparate teams in the same direction and got stories out of them. So every issue those guys did was like a chapter in an ongoing series. They would get together once a year or twice a year and have a big meeting, everybody, including I think the colorists and letterers, and they would sit down for a couple of days and work out the next year's worth of stories.
Mm-hmm.
They put a big whiteboard up on the wall, and they gridded out all the issues, and then started adding in all the stuff that was going to be happening, and worked out a whole year's worth of stories. And they worked out an entire year's worth of stories in which Superman finally married Lois Lane. And once they got that all worked out, Jeanette came in to see what was going on, and she got a look at it and said, "Can't be doing this." So what do you mean? We got a TV show coming up. It was The Adventures of Lois and Clark, isn't that what it was?
Yeah.
And that's going to come up. They're not married in the show. And we don't want people to be confused about having them married in the comic, but not married in the
It's so confused.
show. So you can't do it. So after 2 or 3 days of work, all that stuff went out the window. And everybody's sitting around going, okay, what do we do now? And apparently when you reach these kind of impasses, Jerry Ordway would usually say, casually leaning up against the wall, he'd say, well, why don't we kill him? And that had gone by before, but this time somebody else said, yeah, yeah, that's the ticket. Yeah, let's kill this guy. Let's do this. And they worked in fury, worked out this whole storyline. I don't know how that one got past Jeanette. I don't know if she actually saw what they were going to do. It had to be done quick. And what happened basically was the storyline was already already running, really. It was really, the train had left the station. Mm-hmm. And the story I heard was that word began to leak out, and I guess it's the CEO of Warner Brothers, whoever that was at the time, was at a party. Now, I don't know if this is really true. This is the story I heard. Was at a party, and somebody came up to him and said, so I hear you guys are killing Superman. And he went, so they got back to DC in a hurry.
Yeah.
And by that time, it was too late.
Yeah.
I don't know if the books already left out of the press and were off shipping or whatever they were, but they were already out, and the news was breaking. I remember watching Tom Brokaw on NBC with a Todd McFarlane pinup of Superman over his head that I had DC commissioned for a Superman story I had done, where I got a bunch of my friends to do, like Jeff Darrow and Todd, to do Superman pinups, guys that didn't usually do the book.
Right.
And so Todd did a very dynamic, and that's the one that was up. And it was like the last item of the day, obviously a slow news day. They're going to kill Superman. So the news broke. DC, above a certain level, was freaking out. And they put out the word to the PR department, kill this story. Not the literal comics, we're stuck with those. But if anybody calls up, press, any of that stuff, nothing goes out.
Right.
You don't tell anybody about that. You don't promote it. You don't do anything. We want this story buried. And then within a few weeks or thereabouts, maybe less, it became clear that they had the biggest Superman bonanza publicity since probably the first Christopher Reeve movie.
Yep.
It was everywhere.
Yep.
Wow.
And somebody said, maybe we shouldn't be killing this story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe somebody figured out, well, he won't be dead forever.
Right.
And so the book took off, did really well. But it was the sort of thing that if that had gotten run by corporate before they had done it, it would never have happened.
Right. Right.
And that's right in the early days of creativity top down rather than bottom up.
Yep.
It already started by then, like
Right.
89, 90, 91, somewhere in there, but it became more true as time went by. But that was how that worked out.
Yep.
So whether
Thanks for that story. That's a
I don't know.
great story.
phenomenal.
Dennis,
Wow.
I know you got to split. You want to split, right? Before you split, can you just tell us a little bit about what's up with you now? 2020, 2021. What's next?
Well, gee, okay. Bill and I just finished a Lobo story together.
Yeah, it was fun. That was fun. It's always fun. I mean, it's
fun. It was like, we need this Lobo story right now. You and Bill can do it, right? Just do the usual shit you always do. And you're like,
well, I have to say,
I think we're spoiling them.
One of your jobs.
What?
I think you were a lot of fun to ink. I have actually inked one of your jobs.
Yes, and it's one of my favorites.
It was great. It was a lot of fun to do.
Oh my God. But poor Bill was inking a lot of my stuff, and you know, he's still there. He's still doing it. So we just finished that, and there's been a couple of other stuff. We just did Rock the Vote.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, I think Dennis and I have this, like, we're like, Page and Plant or Miles and it's like we're we just like, I know what he wants, what he's going for or whatever. It's like, and we just gel. It's just, we just have our own shorthand now.
I do tell people, because I have to remember people actually watching this, that working with Bill is incredible, but it's also intimidating because you're working with Bill Sienkiewicz. And even though I've known him forever and we're old friends and stuff, and I can joke around with him and bullshit, it's still like, it's a serious thing. It's like, I always use example with Keith Richards and Mick Jagger would write songs for the Rolling Stones. They would write songs and pray they were good enough for the Rolling Stones. So they would write songs together and present them to the rest of the band. Right? Hoping that the rest of the band would say, what kind of bullshit is this? And we do it. So I'm like that. I'm like, okay, I'm handing this off to Bill. I don't want him to think, what kind of bullshit is this? And he's going to expect me to fix it, So you really, it's like, it's a serious collaboration, but it's a serious thing. It's not like we just fluff it off.
Well, you found a great partner that keeps you on point.
What's that?
You find a great partner that keeps you on point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's always wonderful. I think the one thing that I think that gets it, the fly in the ointment, is when they don't give us enough time, when they kind of have us, with our literal backs against the wall.
Which is more often than not.
Yeah, which is more often than not. And then it's like like a triage unit. It's like, oh, I guess I am going to have an all-nighter, at 62.
They need this at the last minute. Why are they calling us at the last minute with this thing? But then you realize it's, in a way, it's a weird kind of compliment, because they could call anybody,
Right.
But I guess they want a certain look. They want a certain.
They want the best.
And they know that they can get it. They know that they can get it like tomorrow if they really need it.
Yep.
Well, I think a lot of times it has to do with reliability as well. Like that. Certainly, what we did with I don't know if the black the Black Label imprint is still going or not. I mean, when we did the question, I mean, that was again a lot of fun.
200 and something pages,
and it was interesting working in that different format.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I have a question for you guys, really for all three of you, which simply is: in the pandemic, are you working as quickly as you worked before all this stuff shut down? Are you able? I find I'm slower. Maybe I'm taking more naps.
Oh yeah, that's sure.
But I don't seem to be able to concentrate in quite the same way I was before. I mean, I don't know if it is the whole thing, just the miasma of stuff around you, or that I am too old. But I just find that I'm slower, and I like doing other stuff.
In a sense, it's different for me, but in a sense, it's not. It's only different in that this thing has lasted so long, but it's not in that I'm used to working at home. Artists are used to working in solitary confinement for days and months and months and months at a time. It's just like the rest of the world is living like that now. So they get to experience what we get to experience our whole lives, So in that sense, it's not that much different. What is different is that we could always take a break and go out and see people and do something different.
There was the option,
The
option's been removed.
We'll go to Con, spend the whole weekend there and go, ooh, that's enough of that. Let me get back to my studio where there's nobody around, right? but we had that option. We had that back and forth thing. So that's the biggest difference. And that may be for me what would contribute to me not being as productive as I normally would be. Because you just don't have the opportunity to get away from it.
Yeah.
Like you used to.
Yeah.
You know. Now you get away from it and you gotta get away from people while you're doing it. So
yeah, I mean,
Bill?
I've jumped between the productivity and it's probably par for the course for me. I find I go from one extreme to the other.
Yep.
It's like, you know, I'll just dive into it and I'll feel really excited. And of course, I've been doing a lot more pieces with the memorial stuff, with the memorial portraits, and just that's been depressing, where it's been like this, I feel like a ghoul, and it's like, you know, people are dying of their natural causes, but also COVID is added to that. And so so I find that you know, some of the stuff I'm doing is exciting and I love getting into it, and then it's sort of like, oh, like the weekend's here, let me see how much of Saturday I can sleep, you know, like how much I can obliterate. I mean, I think I clocked in at like 14 hours or something like that.
Wow.
It was like I'm shutting down, you know. It's like, and you know, and you know, like be feeling like I'm part cat or something. But it really is like a difference, you know, in terms of trying to manifest my own enthusiasm. It's like, and I realize that part of it is I'll find that sometimes when the weekends come and I've just got nobody I'm talking to or anything else, I'll just go in and work. But come Monday, it's like, and I reach out to the editors or things start to get buzzing again. I realize there is something to be said for having that bit of connection, you know, that there's a little bit of a fire under your butt to get something in. You know?
Right. I would just add to your comment about your memorial pieces, whether you feel like a ghoul or not on that stuff. The thing about that for those, for me, is that they are both sad because they're all people we wish we had not lost, but they're also celebratory.
Oh, well,
they
thank
really
you.
That's how I see them.
Yep.
It's a celebration of these people that we've lost. We have lost them, but the fact that they were around and did the kind of work they did, or I related to them in the way that I did, and I'm reminded of that when I see your drawing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you, man. That means the world to me.
I'm delighted by them in that way. Not that I'm delighting these guys checked out.
No.
But I am reminded of the good things.
I'm so honored, man, and touched that. And I can't stress just what that means to me to hear that from you, Walt. So thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one.
He's not. You're not.
Well, I think I do think that there is an aspect of healing that part of the reason I do them is to try to like do my little bit of trying to honor whoever passed away, and you know, so there is a communal aspect to it that I think is there. But some of the ones were really, really hard. Like, I mean, when I heard about Chadwick Boseman, it was like my mouth just stayed open. I couldn't believe it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and like when RBG passed, it was like, you know, just fuck, you know?
Yep.
For all numbers of reasons, you know, not the least of which.
For many reasons.
And they all have borne out. Every single year that we had.
Everything you thought would happen.
It really happened. Like exactly like we thought it would.
Yep.
To the worst parts of it, and you're like, son of a bitch.
So guys, we have like a minute left.
Okay,
This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Walter and Bill, what do you guys tell us about what you're doing right now in 2021? What you're working on?
Well, I'm writing the 4th round of Ragnarok. Thor goes to Jotunheim. I just figured out what I think is going to be the ending, at least in an unpolished form, a couple of days ago. And so I've written copious notes. Now all I have to do is hammer them all together and make some sense out of them. And I'm finishing up a bunch of commissions. I never take commissions. And because comics shut down a while back for a while, I've taken on some commissions, mostly just full figures, which are interesting. I'd kind of rather be doing stories. But I will say, I can make more money out of the commissions.
I think so.
It's very strange. I haven't done them before. It's very odd. I've got about 3 or 4 left to go. That's it for me.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, I mean, I've actually am doing portraits. Some people, like for commissions, have actually asked me to do memorial portraits of relatives who have passed, and I've also been getting calls for anniversary pieces as well. There's one rather well-known comedian, buddy of mine who I can't mention because I don't know if his his wife will see it. It's I can't even mention, but I'm doing like commissions. What I do is I did his wife basically as Electra, I won't mention the name, but and then I'm also doing just portraits as well, which is something I love to do. But I'm also working on the comics bug just never ends, and I'm curious about. I keep putting off and circling, the perimeter of diving into Parisian White and
with Kelly Sue DeConnick, right?
With Kelly Sue, and I think what's going to happen is I just have to dive into it. But I'm also playing around with a bunch of ideas of my own, just because I really want to do not necessarily straight toasters too, but really be in that milieu again. Of challenging myself and also I think one of the things that does happen is that when you're in a level of isolation, you don't have any other distractions, so that every line seems to mean more in some kind of bizarre way. You put a lot more weight on each one, as opposed to, you're going out and you're having a real life time, and you come back and go, that's good enough, and you let it go. And I'm finding that that sense of stressing over the small stuff, like things tend to get magnified, and I think that some of it is it's really easy to lose perspective, in terms of what you're doing, and that's the one thing I think about having a collaboration and a communal aspect is that because I reached out and I just spoke with I hadn't spoken to Lance Hendrickson in a long time, and it was just he's posted something about asking about Millennium coming back on the air, and I haven't spoken to him in like 2 years, and we just reconnected, and it was just like there is that sense of hey man, I miss you. It's like, where have you been? It's like, and you start to put things in context about because I'm totally an isolationist. I mean, not in the Trumpian way, but I'm like, I'm totally fine. But then when I need to reach out, I mean, I like this is absolutely lovely. I mean, I'm one of those guys. It's like it takes forever to get me out there, and then I get to the party. And like they have to kick me out when the sun's coming up, and I've got the lampshade on. It's like, so this is wonderful, and it makes me miss all of you guys even more.
Well, thanks for sharing your stories. We could go on for hours. We're getting kicked out of here. I'll just plug myself real quick. I've been working on this webcomic called The Red Hook, published by Webtoon, which is a free app on your phone, and I'm launched season 4 2 weeks ago. It's called Blackout, and that's what I'm working on right now. And to answer Walter's question, I've been doing a lot of writing. I've been very creative. So I somehow the drawing is a little bit slower at times, but the writing has been abundant, and collaborating, and it's been a lot of. I've been energized by this pandemic in a weird way. So
that may inspire me.
Yeah, right.
Very good.
Well, I mean, that what gets me is and what this is the other thing that really inspires me about all of you guys is that I feel really fortunate to know so many self-starters. It's like where you guys just sort of jump into it, not knowing necessarily where it's going to go, but you feel compelled and obsessed to do it anyway, to find out and what is the Gertrude Stein, what's the there, and take that chance. And to me, that's that's magic, you know, and
Absolutely.
that really is inspiring. You know, so
Absolutely.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
You know,
All right.
all right.
Stay healthy and vote. And
Stay healthy,
love
yeah,
you
be
guys.
well, and at some
Be
point
safe.
we will absolutely, when this madness is over, we will actually, you know,
All get together.
we'll all
Yes,
get
wear
together.
your masks, wash your hands.
Watch,
socially
yes,
distance.
exactly.
Take care, guys. It's great. to
Vote,
see all of you.
vote. Good to see you, Walt.
You
Good to
be
see you,
good. You
Dean.
guys be
Dennis,
good.
as always,
Bye, Bill.
brother.
Talk to you
Always
later.
Right, great to see you.
Well,
Have a
all
great
All you
night,
guys who
guys.
stopped by to watch, thanks for coming by.
Yep, that's.